In a Johannesburg training room in the early 90s, two candidates sat down to take a standard cognitive reasoning test. The exam was timed, filled with rotating abstract shapes and sequences that only revealed their rules to those who stopped asking why they mattered and started hunting for the pattern. The results followed a familiar script. The first candidate finished early and scored exceptionally well. The second candidate ran out of time, guessed at the final items, and scored poorly. But 18 months later, the boardroom told a different story. That second candidate, the one the test dismissed, successfully restructured a supply relationship across 3 extended families and 4 dialects. He navigated a web of obligations that had everything to do with closing the deal and nothing to do with the corporate org chart. The test accurately captured a narrow set of abstract skills. However, it remained entirely blind to the relational intelligence required to succeed in that environment. We have to grapple with an uncomfortable statistical reality. Measured cognitive test gaps between different populations are real, replicated, and stubborn. Discussing this data usually forces you into one of 2 camps. One side insists the gap is an artifact of bias or poverty, while the other, smaller and more dangerous, concludes that a ranking on a puzzle-solving instrument reveals something eternal about biological worth. These 2 camps share a common assumption. They both treat the IQ test as a pure thermometer measuring innate human capacity. These scores reflect something else entirely: cultural training in a specific orientation toward time. An IQ test rewards specific habits: speed under pressure, decontextualized logic, and the categorization of objects that have no relationship to the test taker's life. These reflexes developed within future-oriented, bureaucratized societies. For centuries, these cultures have trained children to solve abstract puzzles at speed, because those are the skills required to run factories, actuarial tables, and air traffic control towers. The historical data point that dismantles the biological argument is the Flynn effect. James Flynn documented IQ scores climbing roughly 3 points per decade across the entire 20th century in every industrialized country. If you run that math backward, a representative European sitting a modern IQ test in 1900 would score around 70. On the scale we use today, that qualifies as an intellectual disability. But European biology did not evolve in a single century. The cultural environment shifted. Manual trades gave way to abstract schooling, and decontextualized reasoning became the daily furniture of childhood. The resulting scores reflect a population's adaptation to a modernizing environment. They capture plastic cognitive habits responding to environmental demand. Civilizations run on different temporal logics. The modern West and East Asia treat time as a finite resource, to be managed through preventative maintenance and deferred gratification. Many African and indigenous cultures operate on a relational clock. Time is an inhabited field where ancestral continuity and immediate obligations to kin outweigh the appointments in a diary. These orientations can shift. From the 8th to the 13th century, the Islamic world led the earth in innovation, inventing algebra and early scientific methods through a culture that commanded its people to seek knowledge. Eventually, a theological shift toward occasionalism altered the cultural mandate. The internal logic of the civilization flipped, and the demand for independent, empirical reasoning faded. The genetic stock of that population remained constant. However, the cultural and theological demands changed, proving that cognitive habits ignite or fade based on the requirements placed upon the living. We have to address why the American black-white test gap has not closed after 160 years of emancipation. Genuine institutional access did not start at emancipation. It began with desegregation in the 1960s and 70s. This leaves barely one full generation of participation in the schools and credentialing systems that actually train the habits a modern test rewards. Furthermore, cultural trust moves at the speed of parenting. Centuries of exclusion shaped a rational stance toward institutions, fueling a skepticism that the system would ever honor a bet placed on long-term, deferred rewards. There is also the factor of active resistance. Adopting the dominant culture's clock can feel like erasing an identity that survived centuries of attempts to destroy it. The gap has narrowed by several points since the 1970s. This movement follows the plodding, generational pace of cultural transmission exactly as the theory predicts. Using IQ scores to rank cultures against each other is a circular exercise. It measures a culture's fluency in a tradition using an instrument built by that same tradition. This instrument tracks how effectively a student has internalized the specific institutional rhythms of one tradition. It documents their fluency in the abstractions and artificial time pressures that modern bureaucracies require to function. Each temporal logic offers a trade-off. The future-oriented clock produces wealth and medicine, alongside alienation and ecological strain. The relational clock preserves belonging and ancestral truth, but often struggles to scale the high-trust bureaucracies modern life assumes as a baseline. These clocks represent rational answers to different environments. No single way of being in time offers the complete picture. Think back to those two candidates in the Johannesburg boardroom. Each possessed a form of intelligence that was invisible to the other's instrument. The most hopeful reality is that individuals are not permanently sentenced to a single clock. People can become bilingual in time. We see this in migrants who master Western bureaucratic schedules and spreadsheets while keeping the ancestral obligations that give their lives shape fully intact. The intelligence gap provides a map of cultural history. It invites us to value the distinct human capabilities each clock makes possible, and to recognize that a test can only ever tell us about itself.